So our objectives, essentially, we're responsible for international and domestic marketing of Australia as a destination for leisure and business travel. So that includes travel for events and travel throughout Australia. We're also here to help foster a sustainable tourism industry and ensure that we try and increase the economic benefits from tourism to Australia. We have a number of global offices, so we have about 200 people that work for TA globally, located in 12 offices around the world. So you can see there, London, Frankfurt. We don't actually have offices in Paris and Torino, but we have trade and PR partners or consultants that work with us. We have an office in Shanghai, Seoul, Tokyo, Hong Kong. Office in Singapore. We're just about to set up an office in Jakarta at the moment. KL, we've got a small office there. Obviously headquarters here in Sydney, Auckland, LA, and then in Toronto and Sao Paulo, it's the same thing as what is in Paris and Torino. We have consultants that work for us in those markets. So we're active in about 19, 20 countries around the world in terms of our key markets, and we have a budget of approximately 135 million annually. These are very flattering photos of TA's organisational structure. So our chairman is Jeff Dixon. Managing Director is Andrew McAvoy, and I have to say, he's not here, so I can actually say it sincerely. Great boss, great visionary. Really, it's a very open culture at TA. Andrew is often seen walking the floor, very open he's very approachable. Loves when you sort of throw random ideas his way. Really fosters a culture of innovation and openness, I guess, as I said before. So has really, I think, turned around the image of Tourism Australia in the last 5 years that he's been in the industry, so it's been really great. So working from Mark Craig, relatively new, heads up corporate services, so that's finance, IT, legal, risk and HR. Nell, who heads up strategy and planning. Karen, who heads up our corporate affairs and strategy, so that's essentially media relations, government relations, internal comms. Craig Davidson is still in destination development, but I think he's leaving, or has he just left last week? Oh, sad. And Craig was great. So we're looking for a destination development head. They basically take care of investment, aviation, and all of our trade activities and product development. Frances Ann has recently returned back from maternity leave. She takes care of our international operations. That's essentially managing all of our offices, international offices that I talked about previously. And then Nick Baker is my boss, and he heads up consumer marketing. So within consumer marketing, we have our consumer marketing department, which is pretty much brand and digital. Then we have our domestic marketing team, who essentially act like an office, as AKA the China office. They're the Australian office, if you like, in terms of marketing Australia to Australians, trying to keep them in the country. We have research and insights, and then my team, global PR, which I'll talk a little bit about further on. We have set some bold goals for the industry, our 2020 vision, I guess, and the Australian government has actually released a Tourism 2020 strategy. Essentially, it's to take the overnight spend that was 70 billion in 2009 up to between, this slide doesn't reflect it, but between 115 to 140 billion in overnight spend by 2020. So TA's role in getting us to that ambitious, but we feel definitely achievable goal, is to specifically is to marketing in specific target markets. So to harness growth markets, to look at emerging markets, but also to continue to market in our traditional markets, which I'll talk to in a second. To ensure that we have the right product to offer, so we do that through destination development, through our tourism investment attraction activities, which is a relatively new area for us. Access for travellers to get here through our aviation deals, but also development with our various airline partners to increase the amount of routes and access for international travellers to get here, and then building demand for Australia, particularly internationally through our campaigns. We're actually doing quite well in tourism, and sometimes that isn't always perceived in some of the media articles that you read out there, and some almost see the peak of tourism around the Sydney Olympics in 2000. But actually, we're doing excellent despite the sort of high dollar, which is, I guess, still quite high. Even though we're 42nd for international arrivals, we're 8th in terms of overall tourism receipts, but first in terms of spend per visitor. Now you can probably see that as a pro or a con. We're obviously a high value destination or an expensive destination, but we really do feel that we provide a great value, and certainly it encourages most people to stay longer and spend more as well. So for us, from a marketing perspective, we really need to make sure that we're targeting the right customers that can essentially afford to come here and then travel throughout Australia. And you'll see that in our latest TNL, There's Nothing Like Australia campaign, that we are looking at Australia as an aspirational destination to get the right customers that are willing to spend and distribute throughout the country. We actually welcomed a record 6.1 million visitors last year, and Australians took 75 million trips around the country last year as well. So what's it worth, all this effort that we do, and what is our industry worth as a whole? Sort of reading straight off there. Overall, the industry's worth 78 billion to the country, which is split between international inbound 27 billion, and the majority of it being domestic tourism. Inbound visitor nights, 197, again domestic 284, 5.9 to 6.1 depending on the year that you're talking about, visitors annually. Domestic tourism is actually growing. I think we're releasing some new stats tomorrow, which I can't reveal, but it shows fantastic growth again for us year on year. So it's actually a really positive, great story for us at the moment, and it employs about 1 million people directly and indirectly. So to get to the 2020 goal, where will the growth come from? You'll see, and you've probably heard a lot about China, and you'll see why. We really feel that there is, not only feel, we're actually seeing the results already, that China is a massive growth market for us, but it's not just about China for us. We really look at a portfolio approach, so it's a combination of our huge growth markets like China, our emerging markets such as Brazil and Indonesia, but we won't forget our traditional markets, which, as you can see there, UK, US, New Zealand, are still very strong for us, and we're seeing a bit of bounce back actually, particularly in the US market year on year, which has been great as well. What are those different markets worth? We split the markets into different categories based on what they're worth. So those categories that we feel will be worth over $5 billion in tourism receipts by 2020, Greater China, including Hong Kong, the US, including and Canada, North America, including Canada, UK, and domestically Australia. Category 2, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, Singapore, Malaysia, so that's worth over $3 billion. Category 3, worth over $1 billion, Indonesia, India, Germany, and the Middle East. We don't do a lot in the Middle East. As TA, we do a little bit in terms of what we sort of put it in the basket of rest of world, but it is certainly a valuable market for us as well. And as I mentioned, we're looking at expanding in Indonesia. And then rest of world, one of the fast emerging markets, Brazil, we've got a PR and trade representative there, so we're looking at how we're expanding our activities in that market. Okay, consumer marketing. So I mentioned before that I work for Nick Baker in the consumer marketing team, and I head up the global PR department. So within my team, we take care of all of our social media activities, our international media hosting program. So we host around 300 journalists every year. We take care of our advocacy programs, so we have a Friends of Australia ambassador program. Is anyone familiar with that program? Some. We have about 200, I think it's 196 Friends of Australia, who range anywhere from Adam Scott, the golfer, Colette Dinnigan, the designer, Baz Luhrmann's on there, though we don't tend to do a lot with him, chefs such as Matt Moran. And we work with those ambassadors to represent Australia, whether it's in media activities or marketing activities, events, media events. One of my team members just was in India with Matt Moran the last week doing a series of promotions in connection with the India travel mission. But given the popularity of MasterChef in India, he's quite a celebrity there. And one of our key topics, which I'll talk about soon, is about Australia's food and wine offering. So he went to talk about that specifically. So it's those kind of activities, I guess, that we use these ambassadors for. Who else is my team? Event partnerships. So one of the objectives that I talked about before is getting people to travel for leisure, but also for events. So we work with the STOs to establish what are the key events that are attractive or could drive tourism for the international market. So events such as the British and Irish Lions and the Ashes for the UK, Cricket World Cup for India specifically. We're looking at the Asian Football World Cup that's coming up in 2015 as well. The Australian Open, we're looking at working with them in China specifically as a key market for them, as well as food and wine festivals. We're doing a FAMIL in conjunction with Tourism Victoria on promoting the Melbourne Food and Wine Festival. So events, big, I guess, sporting events, key interesting events such as the food and wine festivals, but also sort of colourful events that give the country a uniqueness, a difference, and reflect brand Australia, whether that's the Camel Cup, or recently there was a Hamilton Island race week that we did some activities for. So it's that events that make our country look vibrant, reflect as I said, I guess the brand of Australia, the culture of Australia, and creates a sense of new news that things are happening here in this country. So we support those events in a variety of ways, through PR, through social, through some marketing activities as well. So back in 2010 in May, I wasn't there then, but we launched the campaign There's Nothing Like Australia at ATE in Adelaide, and TNLA, as it's called, as we call it internally, was designed to be long-lasting and flexible. That could be updated as necessary, and we've done a few updates for it. And any of our marketing campaigns that we do now needs to fit within that overall marketing structure. The reason we developed that campaign was a result of two insights: that the world travels to experience difference. And we definitely think that Australia has a compelling point of difference, or a number of compelling points of difference, and that word of mouth is all powerful. It's nothing new, but thanks to social media particularly, word of mouth is spread that much, a lot easier than it has before. So we tried to look at a campaign. The first iteration of TNLA was to go out to the Australian public and ask them to tell us why there's nothing like Australia. I guess you can imagine Tourism Australia is sometimes open to criticism into how we're promoting our own country. Everyone's very passionate about that, which is wonderful. So we thought that we would sort of flip that on its head and say, well, you tell us what we should be saying about our country. You tell us why there's nothing like this country. And we actually got over 35,000 people sending in a photo and 25 words of why there's nothing like Australia, their story, that we then posted on a map of Australia that lives online. So anyone who's sort of interested in various parts of Queensland can see what the locals think is the best thing to do in that country. So that was, I guess, almost pre-social media, to be honest, was a way that we looked at advocacy and encouraging word of mouth about our country. We're in the third year of the campaign. It's appeared in 25 different countries and has been translated into 17 different languages. Last year in June, we launched a new phase of the campaign, and I sort of alluded to it earlier, where we're looking at our high-value customers and how to position Australia as an aspirational destination. So it really is, for us, about putting our best foot forward so leading with the world's best in Australia. We took, we created a new television ad, which I'll show you right now, which is beautiful. And I know the consumer marketing team had a lot of fun creating this. It was quite a challenge. It's quite high end. We shot it all on film. There was various weather dramas that happened while we were trying to film it. One of our planes sort of caught on fire as well, so it was like it was quite traumatic. Everyone was fine. There's no dramas there, but yeah, they had a lot of fun doing this. So let's see if it plays. So as you can see there was a number of premium properties that were featured. Southern Ocean Lodge, Sapphire, for instance, and it was all about us countering the challenges of time, distance, and cost by leading with our world's best to try and inspire those to come and have a one of a kind type of experience. You'll notice too that we try. The whole of Australia was represented as best we could. Beach and coastal is a really big draw card for us, so you can see that we certainly had a lot of beach and coastal, but that was also contrasted, I guess, with the reds of the centre of Australia, but urban is quite strongly represented there as well. Everyone needs to come through a city, and certainly in terms of our search terms, Sydney and Melbourne are two of the sort of highest search terms. So we do definitely need to make sure that our cities are well represented in everything that we do as well. Is everyone familiar with Best Jobs in the World campaign? Show of hands who's seen it? Everyone? Okay, great. So you're probably all familiar that it wasn't our idea. We borrowed it, or in fact, Tourism Queensland, or now Tourism and Events Queensland, kindly allowed us to license the idea and use it and take it national. It was an extremely successful campaign for us this year. Instead of the one job in Queensland, we had the 6 jobs from the states and territories that were interested in participating with us, or really it was more about if youth and working holiday makers were a key target market for them, if it was worth the investment for the states to come along the journey with us. So we had wildlife caretaker from South Australia, chief funster in New South Wales, tastemaster from WA, outback adventurer from NT, park ranger Queensland, and lifestyle photographer down Victoria. So the states were actually able to create their own job, make sure that the job and the experience was really reflective of their state, and they really drove a lot of the activity in terms of what the brand, I guess, of their state was going to be. I won't go too much into the results because I do have yet another video to show you, which she's going to do a much better job than I can, and we'll talk a little bit more about what we did after that. So there's a test afterwards, if you can remember all the stats that were absolutely pumped into that campaign. The reason for that is we want to present that to the board just so they can really see what the results actually were. As you can see, it was a phenomenal success for us. It was one of the most integrated campaigns that we've ever had from a channel perspective, but also from a partner perspective. So, we'll look at whether or not we're going to do it again. At the moment, for this year, we're focusing on the candidates who are in the jobs or about to start the job. So we're looking at how we'll leverage their content on our platforms, particularly our social platforms, australia.com. The states are working on how they're leveraging the content that the candidates are producing. WA, for instance, have launched a blog for their tastemaster that's on a number of different platforms, just talking about his adventures. And we're doing. We've got a global MOU with STA Travel, which will continue into this year to do specific promotions in key markets, the UK and the US. So we are continuing, I guess, the long tail of that campaign this year, and we'll hopefully look at how we can continue to leverage the success of Best Jobs in the future. So what's next? What's our focus apart from youth for this financial year? And one of our key focuses is looking at the development of Austraila.com as our platform. I've been in a number of meetings, including a 3-hour one today, which is actually quite inspirational, with our new digital agency, DT Ogilvy, about what the next iteration of Austraila.com will look like. It's quite forward-thinking in terms of its vision right now. So we're looking at when that will launch, probably mid-next year. Basically the key focus of the site will be a personalised experience driven by data, a socialised experience to see how we can integrate social media and or social media content into the site, and mobilised experience to make sure that everything that we put on that site is easily accessible on mobile as well. One of the reasons that I'm involved in the development is looking at it from a content perspective of how we can make the platform a little bit dynamic in terms of its content and personalised, as I mentioned before. So we're looking at how we structure that and what kind of content we need to produce in order to, I guess, feed the beast. So it's quite an exciting project. The next thing one of the big focuses that we're looking at is food and wine. Reason being is that we conducted what we called is consumer demand research last year, and in fact we conducted the same or an updated version of the research this year. The results are just coming out now. And we went to 11 of our markets in Australia, so 12 markets internationally, to look at what the key drivers for travel were amongst our target markets in those countries, and then where Australia ranked in terms of those motivations and key drivers for travel. So this slide here is actually looking at what are key drivers of travel, so nothing to do with Australia at all, just in terms of, for our target markets, what helps them to select a certain destination. So the two top ones, a safe and secure destination and value for money, I guess are obvious ones, and I guess smart factors, but not anything that we can really affect too much. But the next two, which are emotive triggers, are destinations that offer world-class beauty and natural environments, and also, surprisingly, this has moved up quite quickly, is good food, wine, local cuisine and produce. And in fact, to give you a bit of a sneak peek of the results that I literally just got today to print into a strategy magazine that was due today, and I'm still checking my phone to make sure that's gone through okay. According to our research, good food and wine has actually jumped up and is 1% ahead of world-class beauty and natural environments. Safe and secure destination reduced down to about 40%. I think that's reflective of probably pre-Syria, when the research was done, that people were starting to feel a little bit more secure. That probably goes up and down depending on what's happening in the world. But a destination that offers value for money also went down to about, I can't remember the percentage, but it did reduce, reflecting perhaps a consumer confidence that wasn't there a year and a half ago. So good food and wine is a key driver, and it certainly has risen since our last research in that area. So that was really interesting for us, particularly when we looked at research about Australia. So when we talked to those who hadn't visited Australia yet, only 23% of those people that we spoke to associated good food and wine with Australia. So not that many people essentially sort of really rated us. Amongst those who had visited Australia, it rose to 53%, just below France and Italy. So that's a huge jump in terms of perception. So there's a massive perception gap. And again, in terms of the latest figures, it went to 26% of those not visited Australia. But actually, for those amongst those who had visited Australia, we actually increased and jumped ahead of Italy and now just under France. And that's a global figure. It differs per actual target market. In fact, for those who have visited Australia, We actually ranked number 1 in terms of association with good food and wine in some of our key markets, China, US, India and UK. And again, that was from last year's research that rose to a number of other markets this year. And I can't remember them. I think it's Indonesia, Malaysia, Korea and 2 others. So given that, the opportunity is huge. We we over-deliver on the promise and we undersell ourselves. And in terms of positioning Australia as an exciting, dynamic and relevant destination choice, we really feel like this is an opportunity that we need to leverage. If you look at the media environment, not only in Australia, but we've done some research internationally as well, food and wine programming, magazines, TV shows, etc., is extremely popular. So it's almost in the pop culture or consumer, it's deeply immersed in the consumer world. So we're looking right now at how we can create some breakthrough activities to really talk about what our food and wine has to offer. It's been quite a challenge given the fact that we don't have a national cuisine, and we've gone to a number of intellectual debates about that and to see if we actually do have an international cuisine. We don't. That's okay. So we are looking at other areas that we need to focus on. So our objectives for what we will be doing is to develop a positioning. So what is it about our food and wine? Particularly in relation obviously to the tourism offering or tourism experience in connection to food and wine, to tap into the global food and wine trend that I talked about, and to give people another reason to choose Australia, move it up the consideration to purchase funnel. So that's it. I was told that quickly jump through. I hope I haven't gone too much over time to allow for questions. So I guess the forum's open if anyone has any.
One question. I actually read an article today about the trend in international travellers using more boutique hotels. And there was a little blurb in the article that mentioned for international specifically, Brisbane was the most expensive city. Does that
ring true?
Yeah.
I haven't heard that talked about internally. It's something that I can follow up on. Yeah, I haven't heard that, to be honest, so it's interesting. We've actually had a few meetings with Airbnb. I don't know if you're familiar with them, just in terms of not boutique hotels, but other ways of accessing accommodation. We haven't done anything with them yet, but it's actually quite an interesting model that we'll look at, I guess, in terms of what we're doing with all of our trade partners.
I've got a quick question.
Yep.
Do you know what markets, what the breakdown is in terms of what markets are likely to more do touring, what markets are likely to more do independent travel, self-drive, those sort of stats?
Yes. Do I know it off the top of my head? No. But certainly every time I talk to the guys in Singapore and Malaysia, please give us more self-drive itineraries. So certainly popular in those markets and established markets such as Germany and Europe. Touring, certainly some of the Asian markets, that's still popular, although FIT travel is definitely on the rise, and we're targeting in China specifically FIT travellers because we are seeing that as a growth market. So I could give you those stats, but yeah, to be honest, I don't have them off the top of my head. That's it. Okay, great. Thanks, guys.